Good morning, Wichita, and welcome to City Hall on this very cold Tuesday morning. We'll call this meeting to order. With us this morning is Reverend Ben Staley of Chapel Hill United Methodist Church to provide our invocation. Following that invocation, we will have the Pledge of Allegiance, and we invite you to stand for both.
Let's pray together. Oh Lord, you've kept your promise to us to be a present help in times of trouble. We're grateful for the leaders of this city, for their compassion and for their wisdom, the way they've cared for our people of the city, especially Mayor Lily Wu and her example. We continue to pray for all those family and friends who lost loved ones in the crash several weeks ago in Washington, D.C. We're thankful that those who are gone from us are in your eternal care, but all of us are in need of your grace and strength as we go forward. Be a shelter to us in the time of storm and watch over the people of our community in this winter storm, especially those that must be out who serve us, the first responders and those in the hospital and police and EMS and so on. We are thankful for their service, and we pray, Lord, that you might also help us to be in care for one another. We're thankful for the freedom and opportunity to meet today, to do the business of the city. Help us to make decisions that are in keeping with what is best for us all. Give us the mind of Christ for these challenging times. For it's in Christ's name we pray. Amen. United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Reverend Staley. And I also wanted to say thank you for praying over us during the time of the tragedy, and really appreciate that you came to the airport and also to the community prayer. Madam Clerk, Mr. Clerk rather, could you please call the first item?
Approve the minutes of regular meeting February 11th, 2025.
Are there any corrections or items that need clarification? I see none. I move to approve the minutes of the regular meeting February 11th, 2025.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll.
Aye.
I would like to recognize that Council Member Maggie Ballard is joining us virtually. Motion passes 7-0. Mr. Clerk, please call the next item.
Public agenda. The public agenda allows for up to 5 speakers to have 5 minutes each to address the council. No action will be taken relative to items on the public agenda other than referral to the city manager for information as necessary. Speakers will please state their name and address for the record. A time clock will display the speaker's remaining time to speak. Order and rules of decorum will be observed. The first speaker is Amy K. Lyon. However, due to weather, they canceled their speaking today.
Are there any individuals in the audience who would like to address the council? I see none. Mr. Clerk, please call the next item.
2025 Water Conservation Rebate Program.
And consent agenda is first.
Sorry. Consent agenda items 1 through 19.
Council members, are there any items to be pulled? I see none. I move to approve consent agenda items 1 through 19.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, Mr. Clerk, please open the roll.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Mr. Clerk, please call the next item.
2025 Water Conservation Rebate Program.
Good morning, Mayor and Council members. Gary Jansen, Public Works and Utilities. The item before you this morning is a request for approval of the 2025 Water Conservation Rebate Program. This program has been in place since 2013, and since that time, hundreds of millions of gallons have been conserved through the replacement of household appliances and water-saving devices. This program assists the city in achieving our annual conservation goal of 0.35%, or roughly 80 million gallons per year. Especially in light of the continued drought, this program is just as important as ever. So look at some previous numbers. You'll see 2020 through 2023 in particular. The available rebate funds were originally $100,000, jumped to $125,000 in 2023. For each of those years, all of the funds were utilized, and estimated savings was anywhere from 10 to 12 million gallons a year. We had talked on Friday at Agenda Review kind of what that number amounts to over the years. And on the agenda report, it talks about saving almost 500 million gallons over the course of time. It probably is actually more than that when you look at the life of any of these devices, and then you get the savings year in and year out. That's kind of hard to get to a real number, but we know it's doing what we need it to do. 2024, in light of where we were with drought restrictions, we thought we'd take a different approach and focus on outdoor items only. That's where we need the most conservation during the highest demand months when there's outdoor irrigation. Even with the drought restrictions, we wanted to focus on rain sensors, on those types of things for irrigation controllers. We did not get the response we had hoped, so this year we're going to roll all the internal devices back in. Last year's program also included $50,000 that was allocated to MABCD for their low-income leak repair program. A portion of that was utilized. What's remaining will stay within that program with MABCD so they can keep providing that service. So updates to the 2025 program. As I mentioned, we're going to add the indoor water conservation products back to the program. I'll show a slide in just a moment that covers all of the items that are under this rebate program. We'll also expand access with this 2025 program to offer free shower heads and aerators, which are on sinks in most houses. If we replace what would be the standard 2.5 gallon per minute shower head with new 1.5 gallon per minute shower heads, can save an estimated 5,000 gallons per year. That's per shower head. Same, replacing the aerators with the ones that we were offering can save up to 7,000 gallons a year. These shower heads and aerators will be available at City Hall, neighborhood resource centers, and libraries while supplies last. I'll talk more in just a moment about how we'll make sure we get word out on those. They would be offered one per person, and with the funding that we're allocating for this, we think that we'll have several thousand of these each available. So looking at the what is available for the rebate program, rain barrels, rain sensor shutoffs, faucet and hose irrigation controllers, smart irrigation controllers are all up to $100 each, all being outdoor again, where we really need to focus during the high demand months. Dual flush kits are $50. Toilet repair kits are $35. We've talked in the past about how much a leaking toilet, how much water you can lose, which is probably more than just about anything you see on here. Dishwashers and toilets up to $100, and that also includes washing machines. So details of the program itself will be effective February 19th, pending your approval today, and will be retroactive to purchases made on or after January 1st of this year. We are requesting $150,000 for this program to be split out as follows. $110,000 for City of Wichita residential customers, and I'll talk about that part more in just a moment. $30,000 for our wholesale customers to administer their own conservation program, which we've done in the past. Again, we have 11 wholesale customers that funding would go to as is used. And then $10,000 for the free water-saving shower heads and aerators I talked about. So marketing for this program will be done through a variety of ways on social media, flyers at the neighborhood resource centers and libraries. We put up stickers at the big box stores where a lot of the appliances would be purchased. We found that that's been successful in the past. We'll have mention of this on the water bill, talk about this at the mayor's media briefings. We'll have staff at events like Open Streets where we also offer the free shower heads and aerators. So we're going to do everything we can to make sure we get word out. I think historically, except for last year, if we go back again the years before, we haven't had any problem being able to use up the full amount of funding over the course of the year. For the $110,000 that's allocated for Wichita customers in particular, we would propose to split that funding 50% for outdoor conservation and 50% for indoor. However, we do reserve the flexibility to see how the program is going and shift that funding as needed to make sure we're using it the most effectively. All other program requirements remain the same. Information can be found at savewichitawater.com or by calling our customer service line. And this program, as always, is funded by the approved 2025 Water Utility Operations and Maintenance Budget. With that, staff recommends City Council approve the 2025 Water Conservation Rebate Program and authorize the necessary signatures, and I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Gary. Questions for staff, beginning with Council Member Glasscock.
Thank you, Mayor. Gary, thank you for the program. I may have missed this in the presentation, but let me pull my questions. Do we know how many unique folks have taken advantage of the system? I know we talked about devices, but do we know how many? Because it says that they can be limited up to 5 rebates annually. So I was just interested maybe how many people got 5 rebates versus how many people maybe got 1 rebate.
I don't have that number, but I can certainly try to see if we've got that.
Yeah, it's not contingent on my vote. I was just interested in the data points. And then the last thing, often people may not know how to access the programs. Can we bring the actual devices out to town halls that we can give to people instead of having people come here?
Sure, and that is the plan. I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. Okay. We do plan to have them at different locations.
Okay,
yes.
Awesome. Thank you.
Council Member Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Gary, for all your work on this. Do we have anything like this set up for people who are possibly, I'm just curious, like what all options we have out there. So if we're doing new builds, are these eligible for people who are building their own homes to get rebates on things that are going in for the first time only, or is this strictly kind of people who are already living in their homes?
No restrictions and no limitations on that. I mean, we don't even ask. If people have a qualifying device, we'll offer the rebate as long as the funding's available.
Okay. Do we have any programs set up to encourage developers to also use water limiting devices?
I don't know that I would say there's programs set up. You know, one of our challenges, and I'll tell you one of the reasons last year we said let's focus on outdoor. We're trying to decide how many people are replacing a water-saving device with a water-saving device and how much benefit we're getting from that. I think it's likely with new builds, regardless of the price point, you'd be hard-pressed to go find a dishwasher or washing machine that's not high efficiency at this point. So I think that part kind of takes care of itself. We have talked, there has been conversations, there's been questions asked over the time about do we look at code requirements? Never gotten past the point of just asking that question. I'm not sure that's the place we want to go, but what we've, again, our research is I think all new devices are about as highly efficient as you can get at this point anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for staff? I see none. I will just reiterate the SaveWichitaWater.com website that you mentioned will have all this information. In addition, that's where you can look at the current stages of the drought and how full the Cheney Lake is. So encouraging people to continue utilizing that website. But I will double down on the question that Councilmember Glasscock asked, because unique individuals, so unique water customers, would be something of interest, I think, for the community to know how many individuals are actually utilizing this program and also free services. So if we could get that sent to the council, that would be much appreciated.
We will do that.
Thank you. I see no further questions for staff, so we will now open it up for public comment. I see no public comment. I'll bring it back to the bench. Council Member Tuttle.
Thank you. I just want to thank Gary and all of his team for working on this. There is no more precious resource than we have than water in our community. So thank you for all that you do. I also want to thank all the community members last year in the fall who were very conscientious about following the watering restrictions that we have. As we enter into spring, we're going to be asking folks to do the same thing. As Gary mentioned, we're in stage 2 of drought, and we don't want to go into stage 3 because we could quite literally put some of our small businesses and businesses out of operation. So we all need to continue to stay vigilant, and this is just one more way we can do it. I also want to applaud Gary and his team. We've started a water reuse task force. Council Hoheisel and I are serving on it. Next week, we'll be reviewing the applications with the staff and community selection committee. So I just want to applaud you for your forward thinking. I think there's no better time than while we're in the drought to try and address what we're going to do for future water use. And again, this is for residential, but it's also economic development. We need to make sure that we have water available for business and industry and that we're able to keep our rates low so that they'll want to continue to do business. So thank you for all your effort on this, and I will be incredibly supportive.
I see no further comments. I will
Just
move.
a quick comment, if you
Council
don't mind.
Member-
I'm sorry.
Council Member
I'm
Ballard.
sorry. Thank you, Mayor. I would also just like to thank staff, especially Gary, to him and his team for continuing to find new creative ways for people to participate each year. Before this comes before council, I have constituents asking me if we're going to continue this program. So I know that there are many people that look forward to it. And as Council Member Tuttle said, water is one of our most precious things that we are running extremely low on. So just appreciate the continued work on this program.
Thank you, Councilmember Ballard. I will move to approve that the council approve the 2025 Water Conservation Rebate Program and authorize the necessary budget adjustments.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Mr. Clerk, please open the roll.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Mr. Clerk, please call the next item.
Quarterly financial report for the period ended December 31st, 2024.
Good morning, Mayor, members of the City Council. I'm Mark Manning with the Department of Finance. Today I want to present to you the fourth quarter report for the fourth quarter of 2024. Just a reminder, the fourth quarter report includes unaudited financial activity, in this case through December 31st. We're going to use that data for a couple of purposes. First thing we're going to do is we're going to look backwards on what we expected to happen in 2024, and then I'll relate to you what actually happened and tell you some of the things we learned from that. And then we'll use that information and I'll kind of look forward a little bit, and we'll take our results from last year and we'll talk about how that might impact us going forward and how we might have some opportunities to adjust our guidance a little bit going forward. I'll be a little bit more expansive today than I am normally on a quarterly report since this one is the year-end one and since it will have some implications for us going forward. So the general fund had a good year last year. It performed a little bit better than what we expected, which is a good thing. Generally speaking, we got all the trends correct, but we had a few misses on the magnitude of those trends in a few cases, and I'll go over those in just a minute here. In accordance with our reserve policy, which the council approved a couple years ago, at this point, the quarterly reflects a transfer to the stabilization reserve of about $11 million, which is a little bit higher than what we had anticipated in the budget. And again, you'll hear me talk about that several more times. So what did we expect this year in the general fund? Well, we expected strong growth in property tax revenues. We got that one right. In fact, our property tax revenue growth was a little bit better than what we expected, and that's largely due to lower current year delinquencies. In other words, more people are paying their property taxes on time, which is a really good thing, and that's a trend we've seen for the last couple of years or so. We also expected lower franchise fees than what we collected in 2023. We were also correct there. Our franchise fees in 2024 are, in fact, lower than 2023. However, they weren't quite as low as we expected. So good news is they performed better than we expected. The bad news is they were lower than 2023. Franchise fees, as you know, are very, very difficult to project. They're based on two fundamental things, and that's the weather and that's the price of natural gas, both of which are very difficult to forecast. So we actually underperformed on natural gas because gas prices went down, but we overperformed on electricity. So interest earnings, we've talked a bunch about that over the last few years. We expected much higher interest earnings in 2024, and that's exactly what happened. We collected about $8 million more in 24 than we did in 2023. We collected slightly less than we expected, but we came pretty close. So we generally had that concept correct there, too. We expected much slower sales tax growth. As you may recall, a couple of years ago, we had 2 years of 10% sales tax growth, which was unprecedented. So it wasn't a surprise to us to see sales tax growth slow down a little bit. It's driven by inflation, too, and inflation is a little bit more moderate these days. So we got that one correct, almost exactly correct for that matter. Some of it was due to timing, too. Without going into the nuances, sales tax collections can have some variances due to timing, the way the Department of Revenue collects it, but sales tax growth we got correct. We expected court revenues to be relatively steady. That's one that we got wrong. Court revenues are significantly lower than what we expected, about $2 million lower. That's likely due to lower enforcement activity and lower collections activity in court, but that's one I'll talk about in a little bit. That's one that's a little bit concerning. Now, I will point out that on the expenditure side, court underexpended, likely for the same reasons, but that one's a little troublesome. Finally, everything else, if I can lump everything else into a big bucket, everything else we thought would be relatively steady, and for the most part, everything else was relatively steady. Any deviations you see, again, will be based on activity levels. We have some revenues that are aligned to expenditure, so if we collect less, we usually spend less, and that's what happened in that area. So this is a graphic representation of what I just said. You can see sales tax flat. You can see franchise fees. You can see we outperformed the budget, but we underperformed 2023. But I draw your attention to court fines. Again, the scale makes it a little hard to see the variation there, but there's about a $2 million gap there on court fines underperformance. And like I said, that's a little bit concerning. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So what did we expect on the expenditure side? Well, we expected significantly higher operating costs due primarily to wages and specifically public safety wages, and we expected to have lower position vacancies. Strategically, we've been trying to fill positions for probably the last couple of years, sometimes successfully, sometimes not, but we overestimated the degree of positions that we would have filled, and that's going to lead us to budget savings this year. Again, wasn't something we were necessarily trying to do. In fact, we were trying to do the opposite, try to fill critical positions so we can maintain service levels, but that's proven to be a significant challenge. I'd point out most of that is on the civilian side, not on the public safety side. Specifically, you can see that in public works and park, and even finance to a degree, and even municipal court. Finally, we did expect to transfer to the stabilization reserve this year. That's included in the adopted budget. But as I pointed out earlier, we got that one correct, but the magnitude is going to be more significant than what we expected. So let's look at the expenditure side here. So I've broken it into three pieces: police and fire, which as we know is 62 or 3% of our general fund budget. You can see in 2024, we spent a little over $20 million more on police and fire than we did in 2023. And again, that's the impact of the fact that public safety is an expensive business, and we had some wage growth in that area. And again, most of our positions, we maintain a higher degree of position fills in public safety, and particularly police. I think we made progress in filling police positions. So you can see the impact there in that yellow line there, or yellow bar. Look at everything else. We underspent where we expected to be by somewhere close to $7 million. And again, you're seeing the impact of not filling positions in park and public works largely, but you're also seeing a lot of kind of nuancy things that happened in 2024. We had a lot of one-time things that didn't occur that we expected to, which is not atypical. It goes to things like we had some contingencies budgeted in 2024 that we did not spend, one of which is our snow and ice contingency, which I have a feeling we'll probably spend in 2025. But there were a lot of things that broke, all of which broke in the positive manner. Usually things like that tend to offset each other. Last year, like I said, was kind of an anomaly because everything that broke to the positive. And again, it's timing differences on expenditures. Some expenditures we expected to happen at year end did not occur. It's contingencies. It's a variety of things like that. So we did underspend significantly last year in our other business operations. And then you can see the permanent reserve or the stabilization reserve. We again expected to transfer into that, and at this point we'll transfer significantly more than what we expected. Let's look at our general fund reserves. Remember, we have the permanent reserve and we have the general fund reserves. The general fund reserves are set by council policy at 15%. We are at that policy level in 2024 based on our results, and that gives us a reserve somewhere in the neighborhood of about $48 million or so, if I recall correctly. This is a very positive slide. This shows the general fund reserve level is in pretty good shape. This is the stabilization reserve. Recall that about 2 or 3 years ago, we set this up so that we could rake off additional one-time revenue and put it into the stabilization reserve with the concept of positioning us better for the future. Reminder, stabilization reserve is probably not an appropriate mechanism to fund operating costs on an ongoing basis, but it is a very useful tool for us to be able to make strategic one-time investments to better position ourselves for the future. And so you can see the reserve levels there. And I will point out also that we do not expect to transfer any more money into the permanent reserve after last year. And I think that's probably going to turn out to be pretty accurate. So let's take that information and kind of tilt towards the future. And I'll kind of go over what our basis was for our future forecast going back into March of last year and even into August of last year. We believe that interest earnings have peaked and will begin to decline. We also thought that assessed valuation growth would return to historic norms. We had 2 years that were anomalies, much higher than normal. We do expect that to return to more historic norms. We expect public safety costs to increase again in 2025, again based on some contractual issues that were approved recently. But then we do expect them in our forecast to return to the norm. We also expect all our other expenditures to moderate, primarily due to a lot of the initiatives that we've talked about over the last year or so, and hopefully our strategic prioritization process that we are engaging in also will help moderate our future expenditure growth. And finally, as I noted, our guidance last year was that we would not expect any more transfers into the stabilization reserve. So with that as our hypothesis maybe 3 or 4 or 5 months ago, let me tell you now how I think there may be some opportunities to tweak that a little bit. And incidentally, you'll hear a lot more color on this probably in a week when Elizabeth presents some initial financial forecasts, and certainly by March, you'll have a lot more color on this. We're continuing to reevaluate interest earnings. Earnings are declining, but they haven't declined quite as rapidly as we would have expected in Q4. And there's some, if you read the Fed, which is perilous at best, but if you read them, the signals are that there may not be as many rate cuts in 25 as was initially projected. So we'll reevaluate interest earnings, and we'll see if there's any room there to adjust our forecast. But fundamentally, the premise is going to remain the same, I think, and that is that interest earnings are on a decline. It's just really a question of whether it's a rapid decline or a slow decline. But either one of those will have a material impact on our forecast. We'll take a look at that. I mentioned court revenues. That is very concerning. We'll take a look at that, but I can tell you we look at it monthly, obviously, and to this date, even looking in January, I haven't seen much that would lead us to believe that there's going to be any recovery in that area. We'll reproject wages. We do this every year. We take our demographics of our employee base in January and we reproject. And one advantage, if you will, of turnover, particularly on the civilian side, is typically turnover occurs with higher wage individuals who have been here for a long time. And we typically replace them with lower wage individuals that are relatively new. Not always, but typically. Typically, that'll have a little bit of a favorable impact as we reproject salaries and wages. Of course, we also have some negative impacts, and that's incorporating the FOP contract that I think was approved last fall. But we'll do all that, so we'll have a much better feel for where we're going to be on wage and benefit costs going forward. We also have a few benefit costs that hopefully will break favorably for us. I'm talking primarily about health insurance and pension contributions. Our pension system had a very good year last year. I think we returned a little over 13%, which is very good for us. I don't know that there's much likelihood that pension rates will decrease, but I think the probability of them increasing in the future is diminished, which is good news. We're also trending favorably on health insurance too. So again, we'll see where that leads us. But the point is, both of those hopefully will not be a drag on us going forward, and potentially, particularly as you go to the out years, could be a benefit for us. We'll take a look at that. We'll also consider some one-time options using reserves to enhance our future positioning. As I noted, we have a long history of using our reserves to invest in one-time things, technology or other things that can enhance our structural efficiency going forward. So we'll continue to look at that. As you know, we are accelerating initiatives. That's something we talked about a lot last August. We continue to do that. So we'll reevaluate whether we can impact the budget anymore with those. And again, I'll talk about a lot of these in my next agenda item too, by the way. And finally, like we always do, we will continue scrutinizing our operating cost structure and making sure that the amounts we have budgeted are appropriate for the objectives of our operating departments. That's the general fund. I always talk about any other areas, if there's any that are particularly noteworthy. That's very good news that there's only 2 bullets on this slide because you can infer from that that everything else is pretty much operating, relatively speaking, exactly as we expected. In other words, there's nothing significant that I need to tell you about. I could tell you everything about all the other funds if you're interested, but the bottom line for this presentation is we're operating pretty much like we expected, which is really good news. I'll point out a couple here. Our golf fund continues to operate exceptionally. We had a very, very good year last year. As you know, we set the ending balance at $1 million, and we rake off the excess and use it to invest in capital projects. We should have somewhere in the neighborhood of $700,000 to rake off to fund additional improvements in the golf system. We didn't expect to have quite that much, so that's very, very good news. I will tell you, though, as you might expect, spoiler alert, January and February are probably not going to be good months for the golf system. So when I report the Q1 report here in 3 months, golf probably won't look quite so promising, but they make most of their hay when the sun's shining in the May, June, July, August. So not worried about golf. They had an exceptional year. Landfill fund, a little bit on the negative side. Revenues are underperforming there. Expenditures are growing a little bit. They've got some capital replacement needs coming up, and we're a little bit concerned about some of their liabilities. So you may hear a little bit more about that in the future, but just keep landfill fund. That's on our radar screen, so I wanted to point that out. I want to dive in now into some of the charts and tables we have towards the back of the quarterly report. A lot of times we don't spend a lot of time on these, but I have a couple I wanted to show you this morning. I always show you this graphic here. Our debt is somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.5 billion, debt and loans. The vast majority of that is with our utilities. Those are ultra capital intensive businesses, and we are investing lots into additional maintenance and into new facilities. So as you would expect, our debt levels are rising there. I'll point out the general obligation at large debt, which you can think of as property tax funded debt, is about $75 million and change. That's about 5% of our total debt portfolio. And you can see the other slices on this graphic here. I did want to give you a little guidance on future debt trends. Typically don't do this, but at year end I thought it was a great opportunity to do that. We can kind of see what we think our debt trends are going to be based on the number of temp notes we have outstanding and based on our capital improvement program that you adopted last August. I think our GO at large debt will be relatively stable for a couple years. It'll probably creep up in the out years. Why is that? That's because we very prudently invested a lot of ARPA in the capital improvement program over the last couple of years. You're seeing that in this bullet right here. That is going to maintain our GO debt levels or maybe even decrease a little bit over the next couple of years because we don't have as many project costs to finance because we finance them with ARPA. So that was a very prudent thing that we did there. Why will it go up in the out years? Realize that the debt service fund is always about 4 or 5 years in advance of what's happening. We have a lot of big GEO projects right now going on. We have a couple community centers being built, Patrol West, a variety of others. At some point, we'll have to finance those. And again, it's way too early to be definitive, but I would expect GEO debt to begin to increase in the out years as we try to arrange permanent financing for those projects currently underway. Water and sewer I talked about earlier. I would expect continual increases in that, which means our total debt's likely going to continue to go up. Again, that's due to all the maintenance that we're doing. It's due to the new plants that we are bringing online and will bring online in the future. The other bullet I want to talk about there is special assessment debt. We don't spend a lot of time talking about that, but it is a sizable amount of our general obligation debt portfolio, and it is the second from the left there. A couple things on special assessment debt. That is backed by property taxpayers, but it is actually paid for by property owners that have special assessments levied against their property. That is going up. It's gone up in 23, it's going up in 24, and that will continue to increase. That is because of all the development activity that we're seeing. Again, we're a couple years behind on that. The projects going on now will debt finance over the next couple years. So it's pretty easy for me to say with a fairly high degree of certainty that that bar is going to continue rising. Now, why is that relevant? It's relevant in particular because our rating agencies like to look at our debt levels, and they have a bias towards thinking that we're a little high on our debt levels overall. Again, we explain to them very directly that that is not property tax funded debt. But just be aware that our rating agencies tend to believe that our debt levels are a little higher than what they'd like to see. And on the GEO side, that increase is going to be caused in the future primarily by special assessment debt. I don't talk about our pool of funds much, but there's about 3 or 4 pages in the back of the quarterly that shows you our portfolio. Our portfolio varies throughout the year based on cash flows. I think we ended the year at about $798 million. It's going to fluctuate in the $700 to $800 million range. That is what is driving our interest earnings that we continually talk about. You can see the portfolio yielded about 4.4% in Q4, which is higher than our benchmark, which is the 90-day T-bill rate. That's the first quarter in quite some time that we exceeded the benchmark. And that's because we typically invest long, but it takes a while for us to transform our portfolio because we invest long. But that's a good sign. We've been stretching our duration intentionally, and so we're outperforming the more short-term benchmark. And as I noted, we generated about 34 or change in millions last year off of this portfolio. So this is a very important piece of our financial structure, very important for the general fund and specifically. I'll point out of that $700 or $800 million or so, we have about $65 million invested in local banks. We do that through certificates of deposit. So about $65 million of our money is invested in local banks, which helps those banks out by providing them a source of capital. Finally, I'll note that there is some discussion in the legislature about some proposals that could impact our earnings on our portfolio, which we are monitoring and participating in to some degree. Just be aware that if there's anything that comes out of that could adversely impact the rate that we could earn on our portfolio, that number at the bottom of the screen there, that $34 million number likely would be lower or significantly lower depending on the proposals that are provided. Let's talk about our spending on small business. Here I'm talking about our E and DBE programs which we operate. Those programs are specifically designed to help small businesses, small local minority businesses to understand our city procurement process and understand what we buy and how we buy it and help them navigate our process to make it easier for them to bid on city goods and services. That's very important to us for a couple reasons. One, we support local businesses, of course, but secondly, anything that we can do to expand our vendor base is good for us. So we're trying to expand our local vendor base by our EBE program. We measure this as terms of amount of spending directed to those firms. Well, I shouldn't say directed, not sure what the right verb is, awarded, how's that? That's a better word. Awarded to those firms. You can see we ended the year at 12.2%. Now in the quarterly, we report quarterly results. those tend to fluctuate on quarters, so they're not as meaningful. So I wanted to show you the actual year-over-year results. Now, why is that decreasing? The answer to that typically is in the subcontracting amount, significantly lower in 2024 than it has been in the past. Why is that? That's because on our large capital projects, the airport prior to this slide, the water treatment plant, the upcoming sewer treatment plant, those typically have a very high degree of local subcontractors on them. And so that's why the percentages were much higher in the past years, and that's why we would expect them to increase in the future. So 24 was kind of a valley between those two peaks, I would say. But again, this is reporting that. And again, we could provide much more information on this if you're ever interested. Let's talk about ARPA very, very briefly because ARPA is winding down. But we do continue to produce quarterly reports, which are available on our website. We provide those to U.S. Treasury. Through the end of the year, we spent about $41 million. Reminder, I think our allocation was $72.4 million, if I remember correctly. And the remainder of that amount has completely been obligated. And recall, we had a lot of discussion of that prior to the end of the year. So in summary, our results last year were favorable. General fund results were more favorable than what we expected. Our reserve levels at this point are very strong. In the future, our baseline organic growth is unlikely to exceed our baseline expenditure growth, which is another way to say that we still believe that we will have structural deficits into the future. A little bit in 26, more in 27 and 28. Again, that should not be a surprise. We've talked about that for several years now. Finally, I point out our quarterly report and our ARPA reporting are also available online. Now, I know I threw a lot of information at you, but I apologize for that. But with that, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mark. We'll begin with Council Member Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mark. You guys got a pretty difficult job here to do, especially lately. So that leads me to my question. Do any of the future projections include the possibility of federal grants that we have incorporated into city services being reduced or disappearing?
Typically, we don't do things like that until we have firm policy direction to do that. So I'm not aware of any that we have not included in our forecast unless we've either had direction to include them or unless we know for certain that they will not be renewed or extended or canceled or anything like that.
Right.
Mayor, if I could, Councilmember, we are doing a review at the departmental level. It's still a little early to figure out exactly what's going to happen to many of our grant programs. There are police grants that help finance operations. Many times they pay for overtime for special enforcement initiatives. But most of our federal dollars are for capital projects. And that's really where we're focused right now to try to determine if any program that is partially funded or at this point runs the risk of maybe having funding withdrawn for the last part of it. But we're doing what most cities around the country are doing right now, trying to assess the kind of the changing scenery as it exists.
Right. We got to let the dust kind of settle and figure it out.
Right.
So most of what we receive from federal funding that goes up to everyday cost are first responders.
I believe that's accurate. You could also look at federal funding for the operation of our transit system. That's another one that's significant in terms of operating assistance.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Johnston.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you, Mark. First, you and your team and Elizabeth always do a great job on our finances. It's good to see a report like this. But my question is, I know that Josh and Chris do a lot with subcontractors and really trying to expand our vendor base. And I'm not aware, but are we hosting more opportunities for subcontractors to get to know the main contractors, kind of prove themselves and maybe get more opportunities in that way?
We actually have been increasing the amount of meetings that we've had, and I can get you our statistics there, but we've been much more active in that area. Obviously, the pandemic slowed us down. That's been a couple of years. But ever since then, we've taken steps to try to increase our meetings. And we have these, typically we meet with the county and the school district and even sometimes Air Force Base. And we try to have meet and greets where you can learn about the city. And We've tried to get Chris out into the community even more to enhance that. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I've appreciated him coming out to Atwater a couple times as well. Just trying to think of some more creative ways to get more people involved with opportunities with the city.
Vice Mayor Johnston.
Thank you, Mayor. Mark, thanks for your great work.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Question, on page 65, it refers to the MAC. We have $5 million allocated, but 0 has been spent. I thought we spent some for the winter shelter. Just not paid yet, or?
Page 65.
65.
65?
Yes.
65? Well, I appreciate your compliment, but I'm going to have to disclose to you that I don't know the answer to that one.
That's a great question. There are multiple projects related to the operations and renovation of the MAC. So there is on page 66 is there are 2 projects related to the winter shelter. One was the last season, and then one was for this year, fall through early spring. And then on page 64, those are the projects related to the renovations at the facility. And then page 65, the one where there hasn't been spending yet, that is for operations once the winter shelter for this year is finished. So that's for the ongoing operations.
Okay, for the MAC board?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So there's three, it's complicated. There's three
Okay,
things going on.
okay.
And the winter shelter, the one on 66, page 66, last year, of course, wasn't at the MAC site. It was at a different site. But we've put them on the same page because they're the same type of activity. Does that
Thanks.
help? You're welcome.
So is it accurate to say, to look at the revised funding amount? So page 66, 1 million instead of the funding amount of 485. So add up all the revised funding amounts.
Yes, because the initial funding amount was the initial funding for last winter, and then the revised funding, that's inclusive of last winter and this winter.
So it would be accurate to say 8 million, 8.4 million in just winter shelter / MAC operations?
Yeah, so the two, yes, on the 3 pages, adding together the 3 revised amounts, so.
Elizabeth, the $600,000 this year, that's from proceeds from the sale of the 21st and Opportunity Drive property, isn't that
Yeah.
correct?
This is all the federal, only federal.
I know, that's what I want to correct. I think the question was, where are we showing the funding for the operation of the emergency winter shelter right now? That is not ARPA money. That money is from the sale of the Opportunity Drive and 21st Street property.
Yeah, and, yeah, when there's combined funding, like funding that's ARPA and maybe, like, for the first year of the winter shelter, there was funding from Sedgwick County. For this year, there's funding a humankind has an in-kind. So this report is only of the ARPA funding. It doesn't include the other kinds of funding.
Correct, so we were at least 600,000 in addition to what you're seeing here.
So I'd be happy to put together something more inclusive that includes all of it, if that would be helpful.
I think it would be helpful just
Yeah.
so that all of the expenditures are clear for
Yeah.
community to understand the type of investment.
Exactly, yeah, so this report answers the question, what have we spent our ARPA funding on? And that would answer the question, how much have we spent to support these initiatives? Exactly, be happy to do that. Any other ARPA questions?
Further questions for Mark? I have a couple. I know you were looking for the actual amount, but I think it's important to talk about the debt service. So can you talk about the difference between the stabilization reserve and just general reserves that we might have, the difference between the two and how, I think you mentioned at the very tail end, we will still face structural deficits. So it's not that they're not in existence, but they are there, and we know that they're there. So how would you utilize those funds?
Maybe an analogy, Mayor, the general fund is maybe like your checking account at home. You spend every month on that to your utilities, whatever your operating costs are, your groceries, you have your salary coming in, and you have an ending balance at the end of each month. That is analogous to our general fund. We spend what we spend on operations, we collect what we collect, and then we have an ending balance. But it's very important that we have an ending balance there for a variety of reasons. Helps us with cash flow, helps us prepare for contingencies, things of that nature. And as I noted, it's also a good look for our rating agency. Shows that we have flexibility. Contrast that more with the permanent reserve. The permanent reserves is maybe more like your savings account. When you have extra money, you put it in there. When you have big projects, when you replace the roof on your house, or when you want to buy a new car, if you want to pay cash for it, you might take it out of your savings account. So that's the way I would explain it. The permanent reserves, maybe our savings account. The general fund reserve is kind of more our checking account that tends to fluctuate each year based on our performance. But again, to your point, the general fund reserve, but for anything else, if you're structurally imbalanced, is going to decrease, right? If your expenditures are greater than your revenues, and that's the position we believe we will be in starting in 2026 and more significantly in 2027. So, but for anything else, we would expect our general fund reserve levels in the future to decrease continually because we have a structural deficit. On the other side, again, our stabilization reserve is an excellent source for us to use for one-time purposes, or even maybe to bridge our general fund until we strategically reprioritize and structurally realign. But that's how I would tell you the difference is between the two of them.
And remind us how much is in the stabilization reserve fund, the total dollars.
Yeah, I think it was $43 million, if I remember my slide correctly. I think that's slide 11. Yeah, $43.4 million is where we, at this point, where we think we'll end the year up before any other adjustments or anything.
And the general fund reserve?
It's in the neighborhood of about 48 or 9 million. I can get you the exact number here. I'm sorry, I tend to use round numbers because it's easier for me. At this point, and again, recognize that the quarterly report is unaudited and there's still some final adjustments to be made. But at this point, we would expect the general fund to end the year at about $49.3 million.
Thank you. And then one more question regarding slide number 28. I saw the local sales tax and star bonds, slide number 28. It looks like a decrease. Can you explain that one?
Yes, ma'am. Are you referring to the city debt level slide? Yeah. Yes, very good question. Oops, there it is. That is this little piece, where is it? Down here. It's so small you can't even see the piece specifically. Now, recognize that star bonds are not an obligation of the city. They're an obligation of the special district. We recognize only 4.3% of our total star bond debt because our sales tax revenue is approximately 4.3% of the revenue of the district. But you are correct. Star bond revenue or star bond balances are decreasing significantly. We have 2 star bonds outstanding. One is at K96 in Greenwich, which at one time I believe was up to $75 million several years ago. And the other, of course, is at the baseball stadium or the Equity Bank Park Stadium, where we borrowed, I think, about $42 million. Real high level on those. Hopefully I don't provide you over detail, but the $75 million debt at Greenwich and K96 was initially scheduled to pay off, I believe, in 2032, maybe 2028 or 32. We will come very close to paying that off in March when we make our debt service payment. I don't want to tell you for sure we will, but we will be very, very close to paying off our K96 and Greenwich star bonds this year in 2025. Certainly by August we will. So that debt won't be on this chart anymore. And we continue to make extra principal payments to that, which to your point is why star bonds is going down. As to the stadium, again, we borrowed $42 million. Again, our bonds are structured so that if we have extra revenue, we make extra principal payments. And we actually paid down the principal on the stadium star bonds last year. Going by memory, I believe we paid down an extra $8 million on those bonds. So, and again, I'm going by memory here, but if my memory is correct, I think our star bonds outstanding on the stadium are down into the low 30s right now, 32, 33 million, if my memory is correct. So, but anyway, that's why that little pie slice keeps shrinking a little bit.
So does our budget take into account, because right now there's not a lot of sales tax in that area. While there's not development or continued development, hopefully there will be development. Does that take that into account when it comes to our budget moving forward and how we would be paying off that debt if the development doesn't continue, hopefully constructing at some point?
Let me answer your question, but first let me give you a caveat. We're very reluctant to provide future guidance for a variety of reasons, but we just have to be very careful since we have bonds outstanding and there's a bunch of SEC rules about disclosure. So I want to be very careful about providing future guidance. However, I will tell you some facts that might lead you to a ability to answer your question there. At the baseball stadium star bonds, we have a phase 1, which is basically the east side of the river, and a phase 2, which is basically the west side of the river. Both of those are generating increments right now, which are going to pay for our stadium star bonds. The east side is by far the more established side, and it generates the bulk of the increment right now. The west side, as you noted, is currently, it does generate an increment, but it's currently under development based on a lot of things the council approved a year or two ago. The east side increment will expire in 2026, I believe. The west side increment won't expire until 2038. So certainly it is important that the west side increment grow. I think we've taken strategies to ensure that it grows. But that's basically how I can answer your question, Mayor.
Remind me, phase 2 expires in 2032?
38, I believe.
38.
Yes, ma'am.
While phase 1 expires in 2026?
I believe so, yes, ma'am.
I know that you can't disclose, like you just mentioned, due to SEC, but I'm concerned about this. So I wanted to know, maybe city manager can address some of my concern.
Mayor, I think as we've talked about star bonds, and Mark will have to help me here, if you look at it similar to a TIF district, you recognize that there will be, on the front end, the possibility of some deficit positions with the understanding that you will then exceed the debt service requirements in the latter years, which allows you to recover the losses from the previous years. On top of that, with the stadium debt, we have a backstop that was required by the state, so that we annually put money aside in the budget for out of sales tax revenues should we come up short, and the state then makes a demand that we help fill that with local sales tax dollars. We have not had to do that to this point, but those dollars are basically rolled over every year to make sure that we have that second level of protection on this debt.
How much has been accumulated there?
It's always just the same amount, we just roll it over. Mark, I don't remember the dollar amount.
Yeah, every year in the budget, we appropriate a local sales tax portion to fund the stadium debt service. We never use it, but we appropriate it. And it's, it's required in our bond covenants that we propose that to you. And it provides our bondholders with reassurance. And like the manager said, we have not used it, but we do continue to appropriate it. It varies based on our debt service. Our debt service, I believe, this year in 2025, I believe the appropriation was somewhere in the $2.8 million range, if I remember correctly. Our debt service will increase as we begin amortizing our principal more aggressively in the future. I believe it maxes out at 3.8% or 3.8 million. I'm talking between now and 2038. So it's a fairly sizable amount of money. But again, like the manager noted, the star bonds are basically like a TIF. If we underperform, we can collect it at the end of the district when we overperform. So.
And remind me, there are only 2 star bond districts, right? The K96 and the baseball stadium?
Yes, ma'am.
I was under the impression that there was also another star bond or another Starbond, where the keeper of the planes is. Is that something different, and can you explain that one?
We used Starbond revenue for improvements along the riverbank, but that was quite a few years ago, and that would have been incorporated in phase one. And I think we paid cash for most of those improvements too. I don't think we even issued any debt for it. That was several years ago.
Thank you, Mark. Any further questions for staff? I see none. I just want to say thank you. I know that you keep reiterating the structural deficit that is right in our horizon, and I appreciate you continuing to remind us because we need to continue being prudent. So thank you, Mark. We will now open it up for public comment. I see none. We'll bring it back to the bench. I move to receive and file the quarterly financial reports for the period ending December 31st, 2024.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Mr. Clerk, please call the next item.
2024 year-end closing adjustments.
Well, good morning again. I'm Mark Manning with the Department of Finance. Today, this next presentation is very closely related to what I just presented to you, and that is some proposed year-ending closing adjustments. Now, every year we do a variety of closing adjustments. Most of these fly below the radar. They're just technical adjustments that we make. They're adjusting for accruals and timing issues and encumbrances and a whole lot of boring accounting things that we do upstairs all the time. However, very important boring accounting things that we do upstairs. However, today I wanted to present to you some additional adjustments for your consideration. Now, these are based basically on the principles that we've been operating under the last few years, and that is to invest money, again, in technology or in things that can help improve our operating cost structure going forward. Some of these are based on timing issues and things of that nature. I will also point out that these adjustments will not impact the general fund ending reserve level that I mentioned to you earlier, or the $49.3 million or so that we expect the general fund to wind up at. So let me go over these briefly, and I'll tell you what we're trying to accomplish and what we believe the advantages may be. And then ultimately I'll finish up and tell you what the impact on the different various funds would be. Financial services centralization, you are very familiar with that. We are working diligently to do that and to accelerate the time frame of doing that. That's consolidating things like accounts receivable, accounts payable, and payroll, and a few other functions within the finance department. We have a very decentralized approach now where we've got a variety of staff in a variety of departments, and again, our premise is that we could operate more efficiently if that was centralized. We need some one-time capital funding to do that, specifically new software so that we can implement an electronic timekeeping system. Again, we talked about all this in August when the budget was adopted. We believe there's a lot of efficiency to be gained by electronic timekeeping. It'll improve our accountability and also reduce a lot of manual work that we're doing now, and it'll just make us much more efficient. Now, in the adopted budget that you adopted in August, you actually included $700,000 to be transferred in 2025 for us to purchase this timekeeping software. Now, we're currently in RFP phase. I think we issued our RFP in January. We had a conference with potential vendors, I think on February 7th, and we answered questions. We issued an addendum of about 58 answers to allow our potential vendors to know exactly what we want. And at this point, we expect to receive our RFP proposals back on February 28th, I believe. And of course, then we'll go on the selection process, and ultimately at some point we'll return a recommendation to you. But because of the pace that we're moving on this, one option for you to consider is accelerating the $700,000 transfer and booking it into 2024. So that is something for you to consider, again, based on our acceleration of that process. Somewhat related to that, or actually directly related to that, what we've discovered is, as we talk through this, our centralization is likely going to increase staffing levels on the 12th floor and be more than offset by staffing level changes in our operating department. So fundamentally, we have an infrastructure challenge there. Our workspace on the 12th floor is really not configured very well for additional bodies. We have some other challenges up there too that I won't go into in detail, but let's just say our configuration on the 12th floor is rather archaic. So we are suggesting that maybe a one-time capital investment of $300,000 will allow us to configure our workspace more efficiently and also improve security, but also allow us to accommodate what we believe will be a realignment of staffing levels going forward. We maintain an innovation fund, as you may be aware. This fund is what we use to fund one-time technological improvements, again, designed to help us operate more efficiently. We have we believe some opportunities to enhance police response times, particularly through the use of aerial assets. So we are suggesting that if we moved $400,000 from the general fund into the innovation fund, that would provide us some flexibility to fund some of those improvements and begin working to reduce some of our police response times. Golf irrigation improvements. I talked about golf a little bit earlier. As you know, we have an $8 million golf irrigation project that was approved as part of the CIP. That included $500,000 from the general fund in '24 and $500,000 in '25 to help that project. We are going full speed ahead on that. Jesse issued an RFP, selected a vendor. I believe you approved the vendor several weeks ago. So that project is operating very, very effectively. What we're suggesting here is that we accelerate the second half of that $500,000 transfer and instead book it into 2024. Let's talk about our guest tax fund. This next recommendation is designed to help de-risk the transient guest tax fund and the debt service fund to that degree. So we use the transient guest tax fund, or we like to call it the TGT fund. We use that to fund cultural facility operating expenditures, but we also use it to fund maintenance expenditures on our cultural facilities. In fact, I think later today you'll hear a couple of additional opportunities to do that. So it's very important that the transient guest tax fund be on good financial footing. We also use it to amortize some debt that we issued in 2024 for a cultural facility project. That debt at the time was structured with a large balloon payment in 2034. So we're suggesting that if we decrease the reimbursement from the transient guest tax fund to the general fund, that would improve the position of the transient guest tax fund, which would put us in a better position to fully fund this debt reserve and to have additional cash available to continue to fund maintenance projects at our cultural facilities. I might have jumped ahead a little bit here. I wasn't following my slides here. So again, what we're recommending is if we eliminate the transfer into the general fund on a one-time basis in 2024, that would provide us an additional $2.5 million in the transient guest tax fund that we would use to expand the cash-funded support for maintenance projects. And we would also use another $1.1 million to reduce our future debt liabilities and to fully fund the reserve for that debt. Now, this would have a direct impact on your stabilization reserve. In effect, we would reduce the stabilization reserve to offset this. Now, full disclosure, I will tell you the transient guest tax fund is in pretty decent shape. It's structured fairly well, but again, this would de-risk it further by increasing the resources there. And again, we're going to use those resources to continue to cash fund maintenance activities at our cultural facilities. And the final two don't involve cash. These are more about reporting requirements and some adjustments we'd like you to consider so that we can make some adjustments to our financial reporting at year end and not show negative variances. Again, the expenditures that I'm going to talk about on this slide and the next slide have already occurred. They've already been booked. They were included in the numbers I showed you earlier, but we do have variances in a couple areas, and generally speaking, we don't like to report variances. It's not a real good look. Century 2, as you know, is activity-based. The city provides a modest subsidy to cover any gap between those two. That is not impacted at all by this. However, activity levels at Century 2 have been higher last year, which is a good thing. What that means is our expenditure limit that we set on them is too low. They've spent more than that. It also means the revenues that we set for them were too low also. We don't need to adjust anything on the revenue side, but since we do set the expenditure budget, I think it would be appropriate to increase the expenditure authority for 2024 by approximately $124 million. Again, no impact on the general fund, no impact on the transient guest tax fund, basically just to allow us to report without having a variance. Second one is very similar. This is the fire department. You may recall that they came to you on December 17th and asked for a budget adjustment due to a variety of reasons. Unfortunately, subsequent to that time, when the finance department got involved and we started reconciling their grant expenditures and accrual adjustments and a few other things, we discovered that the amounts that could be charged to those federal grants was a little bit less than what fire was estimating. So that means that we booked expenditures in the fire department right now that are approximately $220,000 more than the general fund expenditure level that was set previously. So we would recommend that you allow us to increase the expenditure authority for the fire department for 2024 so that we can avoid showing a negative variance in our financial reporting for the fire department. Again, just the impact of these, what we're trying to do is we're trying to align to some of the things we've talked about over the last few months, and that's strengthening our debt position in the future. That's funding maintenance projects, in this case particularly cultural arts, cultural facilities. That's using one-time dollars to do things that we think will increase our future viability. And again, it's to accelerate some of the one-time funding that you have already previously approved. I'm going to wrap up here. This slide here kind of summarizes everything I talked about. If you're a visual person, this would reduce your 2025 general fund expenditures by about $1.2 million. It's going to reduce that because we're going to shift it into 2024 and book it in 2024. Again, we would have about $0.7 million in one-time funding. That's, again, infrastructure improvements in City Hall here on the 12th floor, and that is increased funding for the Innovation Fund so we can experiment with some police response issues that we think can improve performance there. And as I noted previously, this will also, in effect, increase funding in the transient guest tax fund for maintenance projects and to retire or to increase our debt reserve, and it would also ultimately reduce the stabilization transfer that I showed you previously by about $4.3 million. So I think I told you there was $43.4 million. If these are approved, or to the degree these are approved, that balance would be probably closer to $39 million. So sorry for throwing a lot at you. Those are the adjustments we'd like you to consider, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mark. We'll begin with Council Member Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mark, all your guys' work on this. 2 points and then 2 quick questions. Ahead of time, it really helps us down the line, and I fully support the Innovation Fund. I think there's going to be some interesting ideas that come from that. On the financial service centralization, do we have an estimate of any savings that we will make expediting this, or how much savings do we expect that to help with?
We talked about that when we adopted the budget back in August, and I'm going to think that our estimate was $200,000.
A year?
I think it's going to be materially higher than that. I can't tell you. We're in the process right now of evaluating everything. We're analyzing job duties. We're looking at what our processes can be. So I can't exactly answer your question, but I can tell you based on the study that I've done, I think the potential is significantly higher than what we initially expected. And so that's one reason we're operating at an expedited pace. There's a variety of other reasons too. It'll increase our efficiency, and there's many, many, many advantages to it. But we believe it's in our best interest to advance that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Last question. If we're moving $500,000 up for the Gulf irrigation, that money, if I remember correctly, we switched over from a parks maintenance fund. Is there any movement towards backfilling the park maintenance funding? I believe it was building maintenance, or are we just going to let that one sit with the transfer that we had?
I think that's probably a better policy question for our CIP development phase when we do that. So I would tell you maybe to consider that as we develop the CIP and look at whether there's any opportunities there. But But I will tell you, this is fundamentally not going to change the financing of the irrigation improvements. All it's going to do is accelerate it because our commitment from the general fund was $1 million, and this would just accelerate it.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Any further questions for staff? Double checking again. So the stabilization reserve was 43 million. It would be 39 million if we do these adjustments. Is that correct?
yes, ma'am. I'm going from memory, which sometimes I get a lot of numbers up there and it may not be as good as it used to be, but I believe I told you on that previous slide that it was 43.4 million, if my memory's correct. So this would take about 4.3 off of that and put it down to about 39 million. Still materially higher than last year, still materially higher than what we had envisioned in the adopted budget, but lower than what it could be if you choose not to make these adjustments.
And then lastly, the Innovation Fund transfer, slide number 41. I know that this is going to be piloted by police, but I do see this as helping fire. It would also help public works. This would be drones as first responders, and I had a whole presentation that I got to hear with both police and fire, and I see that there's opportunities for other departments to benefit from this.
Yes.
So moving forward, I would like to see how this benefits other departments as well, so that it's not solely on the budget of the police department.
Yeah.
Thank you. I see no further questions for staff. We will now open it up for public comment. I see none. I'll bring it back to the bench. Thank you very much, Mark, for both the presentations. I move to approve the recommended post-closing adjustments for 2024.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Mr. Clerk, please open the roll.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Mr. Clerk, please call the next item.
Botanica, the Wichita Gardens security improvements.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Lindsay Botanica with the City Manager's Office with a few agenda items for you today, starting with Botanica for some security improvements that we're proposing and requesting there. All of my presentations today will reference our cultural arts strategic plan that was adopted a little less than a year ago, and just pinpoint some of the objectives in that strategic plan that relate to this agenda item. In particular, to ensure that city-owned cultural arts facilities are and assets are a source of community pride and accessible to all. And then the next one is to address short-term and long-term maintenance needs at various facilities through an annual plan. I do want to acknowledge our annual plan at all of our facilities is a work in progress. In particular to Botanica, we've spent the last year working really closely with Public Works and our operator, Botanica Inc., to identify maintenance needs. And we've been really strategic in making sure that the entire facility and the whole portfolio of the facility is reflected accurately in our DST, the decision support tool that guides Public Works into making assessments. This project was identified before we had the full assessment of that DST report. I'm proud to say that as of right now, the full facility is now in our DST, which will better inform future capital improvement projects at Botanica. A little bit more background. The city owns several cultural facilities, including Botanica. Botanica opened in 1987 to generate enthusiasm for horticulture and enlighten people through educational, artistic, and cultural experiences. It's a very popular facility that is it's operated in partnership with Botanica Inc., a nonprofit organization who manages the day-to-day operations. So although owned by the city, it's operated independently by a nonprofit. It maintains thousands of plants, hundreds of trees, presents nearly 100 special programs, and it just closed out one of its most popular events, Illuminations, which is heavily trafficked in the winter months. Some additional background is that as a cultural institution, the Division of Arts and Cultural Services, under the division, Botanica submits an annual report to the city. In 2023, so a couple budget cycles ago, their annual report process included identified the need for security improvements to ensure continued safety of visitors, staff, volunteers, and to protect the facility itself. So we rolled this into a CIP project that was unique just to Botanica to ensure that we could address it in this fiscal year. And in the 2024 annual report that we just received from them, it was really exciting to see that they had over 350,000 visitors to the gardens last year, and that the organization has an annual economic impact of just shy of $20 million. This time last year, we were here with Randy Cohen talking about our Arts and Economic Prosperity Study. We now have a calculator for cultural arts that we can calculate the actual economic impact of each of our partner organizations. Some analysis is that this project includes security camera system improvements, installing additional cameras and fixtures, including lighting fixtures. Financial considerations, the adopted CIP contains $120,000 in TGT funding, which you just heard a little bit about from Mark, for this project. And staff recommend initiating the project funding and approve the bonding resolution. With that, I stand for questions.
Thank you, Lindsay. Questions for staff? Just a couple of things. Number one, I know that these are security cameras, so I wanted to make sure that these are being integrated with the Wichita Police Department's Real-Time Information Center, ARDIC.
I believe they are, yes.
And then lastly, anything to help with improvements to safety and the infrastructure are well done investments. So I wanted to know how this kind of, is this normal for the city to own a property, but a nonprofit to run day to day? And so what are the responsibilities of the city?
That's a great question. In a future agenda item, I talk about our cultural institutions in particular, and I would say all of them have slightly different operating agreements with the city, but of the facilities that we own, we are responsible for the safety and security of them and capital investments, for the most part with some exceptions. But for Botanica itself, we own it, the nonprofit operates it. They can propose capital projects to us. They have a long history of self-funding those capital projects, but when it comes to we would say the infrastructure of it, security, safety, roofs, plumbing, electric, most of that will always fall on the city as the owner to take care of. Does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I see no further questions for staff. We will now open it up for public comment. I see none. I'll bring it back to the bench. This resides in Council Member Ballard's district.
Thank you, Mayor. Ignore my voice. I'd like to take the recommended action, initiate the project, and approve the bonding resolution.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Mr. Clerk, please open the roll.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Mr. Clerk, please call the next item.
2025 Artist Access Cultural Funding Allocation Recommendations and Cultural Institution Operating Partnership Agreements.
Thank you. Lindsay Botanica back again with the City Manager's Office, Division of Arts and Cultural Services. This next agenda item is a little bit two-part. One is for our Artist Access Grant Program, and then also the annual allocation to our cultural institutions. Starting off again with our Cultural Arts Strategic Plan, which really guides everything we do. Our mission is to ensure that everyone has equitable access to opportunities by activating and strengthening the creative potential of our community. And our vision is that Wichita is recognized as a community where artistic expression is an integral part of the city's success, where arts thrive and cultural heritage is preserved and celebrated. A few strategic objectives that relate to the cultural funding program that are in our strategic plan. I wanted to highlight a few of them. Specifically, the last two here is to evaluate the cultural institution program and assess accountability and community impact measurements. Typically, we come with this agenda item at the end of the calendar year so we can inform our institution partners what their allocation is for the following year. We've pushed it back a little bit this year because we now have a formal annual report process. So we just received those annual reports from them. So now we're requesting a budget adjustment. Previously, we did it before we received that data back from them. So we're trying to move it into more of the performance-based measurements when we're requesting additional resources for our partners. And then also in the last one is revamp the allocation structure to the cultural funding program to support growth, creativity, and accountability. We've done some strategic overhauling of the funding program, specifically in the grants area over the last few years. And you'll see in this presentation the growth we've had in the program and the depth of impact that we're excited that we have in the community through some of those structural changes. And then in particular, because this plan was passed May of last year, all of the narrative questions for our grants for funding this year is related directly to the plan. So we're excited to have that through line to really move our mission and vision forward. As a reminder, we have a few different funding opportunities through the cultural funding program. We have operational grants for our nonprofit partners. We have the Arts Thrive project grants. That was a new program for this year that's funded through the National Endowment of the Arts. And then artist access grants. These are individual funding awards to local artists for professional development opportunities. I always like to remind people that this is not for the creation of art or the development of artwork, but really investing in the professional aspect of the artists as entrepreneurs and small business owners in our community. And then cultural institutions, which we just talked about, Botanica is one of them, but a lion's share of our funding goes towards our cultural institution and our partner organizations. And these are organizations that receive dedicated funding and have operational agreements with the city. These are non-competitive funding opportunities. The cultural funding program itself is overseen by our Cultural Funding Committee. They review grant application and make recommendations to City Council. As a reminder, there are 11 committee members, 7 are appointed by City Council and 4 by our partner organization, the Arts Council. The grant cycle is administered annually and applications are new and competitive each year. So previous applications are not considered in the review process. In particular to the Artist Access Program, artists can apply 2 years in a row to receive funding and then they have to take a year off. Although we have that in I think a couple instances this year, but previous applications are not considered during the review process. And the grant program is in current review as relates to our strategic plan. We know that any funding adjustments we make to our partner organization should be done with open communication with them, and over time, we are trying not to have any major changes to impact the operations of our partners. The projected funding for grant opportunities was estimated at $509,000 for this year, of which $495,000 was allocated to our operational grants. That left $14,000 in change for the allocation of our artist access grants. The operational grant opportunity awarded a record number of 37 grants to local arts and cultural organizations. And just for comparison, last fiscal year we awarded 23. This year we're awarding 37. So again, just the growth in the program and the depth that we have in the community is pretty significant. For the Artist Access Grants for 2025 in particular, staff received a record high of 71 grant applications during the open review cycle. The committee recommends funding 22 applications for 2025 based on the $14,000 and change that's available. The total amount requested was just over $63,000. So this is a very, very competitive grant cycle this year, so we want to make sure we acknowledge that. And we want to make sure that any applicant knows that if they were not selected, it was not due to the quality of their artistry or the value that they bring to the community, but it's just reflecting the limited funding we have available for the large influx of applicants that we received this year. So it really was a competitive cycle. And then for comparison, for this fiscal year, for 2024, or I'm a year behind here. For last fiscal year, 2024, we had 40 applicants, 26 were funded based on the funding available last year. 2023, much lower at 4 applicants and 3 funded. So really just want to take a point of personal privilege to acknowledge our cultural Arts Administrator, Jesse Koza, for the amazing outreach he's done in this sector in particular to really work very closely with individual artists. Many of them, this was their first time ever applying for a grant, so we see that as a win for professional development just on its own. All right, so here are the recommendations for 2025 Artist Access Grants from the Cultural Funding Committee. There are 22 awards here. I do want to point out that there are 5 awards that are fully funded. The rest are prorated based on their scoring and ranking of the committee. of the 2020, the 22 grants that are recommended, here's a breakdown of what those grants are going for professional development: artistic residencies, conference attendance, continuing education opportunities, expanded marketing, and workshop participation. And then moving on into our cultural institution operating partnership agreements. So in short, I think the general terms I like to use when describing cultural institutions is that these are organizations who are responsible for managing city-owned assets or operating out of a city-owned facility. Cultural institutions each have a unique operating partnership agreement with the city that is tailored to that relationship. For the organizations that we'll see in this latter part of the presentation, they all have contractual language that ties it to the cultural arts mill levy equivalent and a dedicated allocation. And in particular, the absolute dollar amount provided to the institution fluctuates year to year, as do the revenues obtained through our property tax. So every year we come to this body asking for the allocation adjustment for the availability of funds. So this is a list of the organizations that are eligible for that annual adjustment. I do want to point out that the Arts Council recently renewed their operating agreement in December of last year, so their funding adjustment was already approved. So the request today is for the remaining organizations to receive their 7.9% increases based on the mill levy change. And one thing that's exciting is this middle column is the economic impact that we can now calculate through the Arts and Economic Prosperity Study. So it's exciting to see what the city's investment is versus the return on investment in economic activity. And then I do want to highlight some of the organizations that you might not see on this list that likely come up in question. So Botanica, the organization that we just saw, is considered a cultural institution. It's floated throughout the years between a parks facility and an arts facility. Currently, it's under the arts division, but it is not eligible for this funding. It receives dedicated funding through staff and some additional public works support. And then similarly, Century 2, City Arts, and Cowtown are sometimes considered cultural institutions, but those organizations, well, City Arts and Cowtown are owned and operated outright by the city, so we manage their budgets entirely, although we have partnership advisory boards that help guide the operation. They truly are city-owned and operated, not through a nonprofit partner. And then Century 2 is operated a little bit differently under ASM's management. So the recommendation here today is to approve the funding allocations recommended by the Cultural Funding Committee and operating partnership agreements for the cultural institutions and authorize the necessary signatures. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Lindsay. Questions for staff? I see none. I just wanted to say I appreciate seeing the higher number of applicants wanting to connect and look at those resources that are available, and then knowing that the recipients will have a portion of their ask funded is really an investment by the city to these individuals. And so I appreciate that the council did this, but also that the advisory board took the time to review all these applications and provided some funding for them through this. So thank you, Lindsay. I will now open it up for public comment.
Good morning. I'm Molly McPherson, the Director and CEO of the Wichita Art Museum, and I'm here today to thank the City of Wichita for the funding that we receive and to share some of the ways that this support impacts our community. WAM is celebrating its 90th birthday this year. We were started by Louise Caldwell Murdoch, who specified in her will that the income from her estate should be used for the purchase of art for the City of Wichita. Today, we are proud to be stewards for this collection and to fulfill our mission of connecting people, ideas, and art for the next 90 years. Funding from the City of Wichita is crucial for our ability to care for our collection for generations to come. It also supports programming for visitors of all ages. Some of the services that we provide for our community include free general admission, extended hours on Friday evenings with a different program each week, several free programs for preschool-aged children and their families, including Art Start and Storytime. We have a free interactive space for families and visitors of all ages called Play that supports childhood development and creative thinking skills. Play includes a toddler spot, book nook, an area for open-ended creative play, and an art lab where art-making materials are free and available to anyone whenever the museum is open. We host 6 free family days each year that include art making, performances, and many other activities for families to participate in together. We offer completely free field trips for school groups, as well as 100% bus reimbursement. And I'm proud to share that WHAM received a Good Apple Award from Wichita Public Schools last year in 2024, recognizing our partnership with the Fine Arts Department. This partnership includes leading in-services for their visual arts teachers, an annual showcase for Wichita Public Schools performing arts groups, and most recently, exhibitions of artwork by students who attend Wichita Public Schools. These are just some examples of the work we do to make WHAM accessible and engaging for our community. And on behalf of all of the staff at the Wichita Art Museum, I'm deeply grateful for the city's financial support that allows us to continue to do this work for our community. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll continue with public comment.
Good morning, Mayor and City Council. My name is Matthew Broderick. I'm with the Arts Council. I thank you guys for coming out in the cold and making it here safely. I hope you get home safe as well. The Arts Council is so grateful for your support of the future of our city, and so grateful for your support of these items that help make our city livable. We believe that the arts mean business, and our mission is to promote and advance arts and culture in the city of Wichita through advocacy, education, and outreach. I think that the hard work that's done by the Cultural Funding Committee to review all of these applications and to make these determinations deserves special recognition as well. I know that the folks that we put into the committee spend hours and hours and hours, and we are happy to help get them fed and keep them energized while they're doing their work. But we're grateful for your guys' support, and that's all I came to say. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll continue with public comment. I see none. We'll bring it back to the bench. Council Member Tuttle.
Thank you. Thank you to the speakers for being here today and braving the cold. And Matthew, thank you for your service as the Arts Council President. I'm a proud member of the Arts Council Board. Also want to thank Lindsay for your relentless efforts in this area. Really appreciate all that you do. You're just truly a blessing to the city and to the city staff, so thank you. Also want to thank the Cultural Funding Committee, again, has been mentioned, but for their work. I've been involved in these processes in the past before I was in council, and so very grateful for everyone's time. Lindsay alluded to it, but I can't help myself. I have to mention it again. In 2023, we did the AEP6, the Arts and Economic Prosperity Study, and we found that arts in the non-for-profit sector in our city account for $184.7 million in economic activity, $184 million annually in economic activity. Also, it's 2,929 full-time equivalent jobs. That's not just artists, that's accountants, that's people who are the CEOs, people who are in the stage design, all the different things. So that's a significant impact in terms of employment. And then also it generates $32.3 million in local, state, and federal tax revenue annually. So arts do mean business in Wichita. And when we adopted the Cultural Arts Strategic Plan, I committed to not only vote for it on that day, but that I would do everything that I can to support it. And I feel like being supportive of this initiative today will do that. So I will be incredibly supportive. Thank you.
I see no further comments. I will move to approve the funding allocations recommended by the Cultural Funding Committee and the operating partnership agreements for the cultural institutions and authorize the necessary signatures.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Mr. Clerk, please open the roll.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Mr. Clerk, please call the next item.
Cultural arts facility improvements.
Back with it, just a couple more. Lindsay Botanica with the City Manager's Office, Division of Arts and Cultural Services. This next agenda item is related to the promenade area, related to Century 2 and Hyatt. The City of Wichita owns several cultural facilities, including this property, the Promenade Conference Area. In 2017, the city entered an agreement with Riverfront Hotel LLC, who had the DBA of the Hyatt Regency Hotel. And in that agreement, the City of Wichita is responsible for maintaining and refurbishing the promenade level meeting rooms to a quality level and style comparable to and consistent with the meeting spaces within the remainder of the adjacent hotel. As it relates to the strategic plan, again, we want to ensure that our city-owned facilities, our assets, facilities and assets are a source of community pride and accessible to all. And we always want to make sure that we're working to address the short-term and long-term maintenance needs of the facilities through an annual plan. For this facility in particular, the meeting rooms are used for a variety of special events, conventions, and conferences. City staff, along with the management partners of ASM and Hyatt Regency, we meet regularly to go over the various needs of the facility. And in a previous meeting, we identified a need to make repairs and improve the aesthetics of the promenade area to make sure it's an attractive venue for conventions and conferences. This project in particular includes aesthetic improvements, including replacing the carpet, wall coverings, and fixtures. We also hope, if funding is available from the project, to address some of the technology, but we're really prioritizing aesthetic improvements at this time. And as many of you know, the tourism industry in Wichita drives significant economic activity. For the financial considerations of this project, the adopted CIP contains $2 million in TGT funding for the Hyatt Promenade improvements. I also want to acknowledge that we have additional funding in fiscal year 26 for $1.5 million. So in total, across 2 fiscal years, we're estimating this project being about $3.5 million. But for this year, we're just focusing on a certain component of it at the $2 million mark. And then staff recommend initiating the project and improving the bonding resolution. This was a short one, but happy to stand for any questions if there are any.
Questions for staff? I see none. We'll move to public comment. I see none. I'll bring it back to the bench. This resides in Council Member Johnston's district.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that the City Council initiate the project and approve the bonding resolution.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Mr. Clerk, please open the roll.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Mr. Clerk, please call the next item.
2025 Downtown Pedestal Art.
Okay, back again for my last presentation this morning. Lindsay Botanica with the City Manager's Office, Division of Arts and Cultural Services. As it relates to the strategic plan, this project in particular is a new exciting opportunity to reinvent a previous program that existed in the community. And the strategic objectives related to public art and this project in particular that have been highlighted at the bottom here are to promote free and affordable cultural arts opportunities. Public art is a great example of that because it is free to view and available at all times for any constituent to enjoy. We want to continue growing and restoring our public art collection, as well as ensuring the public can engage with and access. We want to incentivize community partners and individual artists to develop new artwork. And then another project that we're working on that is not directly related to this project, but we hope that has a nice correspondence, is that we're developing a public artist toolkit and incubator programs to expand professional opportunities for local artists. We have a very robust local artist community, but we've heard over the last few years of not being able to win the bids on various RFPs or RFQs we have for public art, and we're hoping that this project in particular can be a low entry point for, or an easy entry point for local artists to enter the public art sphere versus going after some larger projects that we have on the docket. Some background on this project in particular is that from 2008 to 2023, the Arts Council, a local nonprofit, administered a program called a Sculpture Walkabout. This program featured sculptures on pedestals throughout the downtown area. The Arts Council sunset the program in 2023, with conversations with my division due to difficulties in rotating the artwork annually and ongoing funding limitations. The initial idea of that program was that the artwork would rotate out every year and it would be on loan through the artist. It would be available for sale so businesses could purchase artwork. Not to say that that didn't happen, but didn't happen, I think, at the level that we would have deemed successful. So we were wanting to reinvent or take a look at the program. Ultimately, the annual funding required for those annual loans became a limitation of the Arts Council. Since the program closed, the city has filled 2 of the vacated pedestals through one through a donation and one a permanent loan. Those are there are also 2 temporary displays that currently exist as well. I just want to do a quick shout out and express some gratitude to Agnew and Associates who have given a permanent loan to the city for the image that you see on the screen, Cloudy with a Chance by area artist Roland Karg. We're really thankful that that long-term loan has been made available to the community. And also some additional gratitude to Roland Karg for donating an additional sculpture that's near Larkspur for the program. We're grateful for both of those individuals for contributing to the public art program. There are currently 14 pedestals available for permanent installation. The pedestals are all city property. That was part of the original agreement with the Arts Council, is that the city provided the pedestals, they're city property, and 14 are currently available for permanent installation. The Design Council identified this project through its annual budgeting allocation process last year and identified funding in the 2% for Art program to help support this project. The Design Council recommended the city acquire sculptures permanently into the public art collection, so they would no longer be on annual rotation. We would do a one and done, purchase them, versus having a goal of annual rotation. The Design Council and staff believe this to be a much more sustainable program for these pedestals in particular. Staff have communicated with various stakeholders on the proposed project, including the Arts Council, Downtown Wichita, Harvester Arts, and Old Town Association, who have all been great partners with the previous Sculpture Walkabout program and are, I believe, supportive of this project as well. Here's a map of the pedestals that are available. Just pointing out the green stars on the screen are the Agnew and Associates and the Roland Karg contributions to the city. The other ones are available for permanent displays. And I'm going to talk about the star in the southwest corner of the map because it's a bit of an anomaly. The rest all exists in really the true Old Town downtown area, but there is one in at the baseball complex that's worth pulling out. The stadium pedestal was part of the overall public art that was related to the baseball stadium's design. We have a lot of art that's integrated throughout the stadium. This pedestal initially was supposed to be rotating art. It has not necessarily successfully rotated the art, but we believe that the sculpture that's currently there, that we just renewed a loan agreement with the artist for another year, could be another site for either purchasing a permanent work or purchasing this piece at a prorated rate. So past contributions that we've made to this artist for the loan could be applied to a purchase. Versus having an annual rotation, we think just having a permanent piece would be the best case scenario for this pedestal, so we've folded it into this whole project. But this piece in particular was designed for the stadium by local artist Mike Miller. The picture, I will say, doesn't do it justice, as is the case with most art, but it is a kinetic sculpture that moves and rotates with the wind, so very fitting for the Surges Stadium. And it is currently on an extended loan agreement. We just approved an extension of the loan through February of next year. If this artist was interested in it being purchased permanently by the city, it would be part of the competitive program. So it would be up to the review committee and this body to ultimately purchase that piece if that's the will of the various bodies. As we look to approach this project in general, we do hope to have a competitive application process for the art selection that would go on these 14 pedestals. Once the funds are initiated, we will open calls for proposals through the platform Call for Entry, which we affectionately call CAFE. This is the national standard for public art proposals. Prospective artists will be able to submit their proposals for consideration. A panel of stakeholders, many of which were named in a previous slide, will review and make recommendations to Design Council. Design Council will make a final recommendation to City Council, as they do on all public art. Some background that I think is interesting that we get a lot of questions about as we've really spent the last couple years kind of overhauling our public art program and making sure that the public was aware of it and knew how to access it. But the utilization of Call for Entry or CAFE was really started in 2023 as our primary platform. It used to be project-based. Now we have a universal platform, so everyone is in the know of what we have available. In 2024, we issued 8 RFQs, resulting in 536 applications from across the country, including local artists. And also in 2024, 20 commissions were awarded from those 8 RFQs. Of those commissions, 58 were awarded to Wichita area artists, 42% were awarded to the national and international artists. This is an increase of local artists from the year before. And we think this is a good balancing act. We want to always make sure that we're attracting new talent into the community and showcasing our local community to what's out there, but we also want to make sure that we're investing in our local artists and making sure that they have opportunities to present their artwork in their hometown. Artists who are interested in participating in this project will be guided to Call for Entry once it's available. I also want to highlight our public artists registry. We've had this for many years, but it's been utilized to various degrees. It's publicly accessible on the city's website. And any artist can register to be listed as a public artist on that registry. It doesn't necessarily that we endorse them or we guarantee their work, but they're essentially on the contact list for any time we have an opportunity. They're in the know and we send them a notification. Similarly, all of our construction engineer partners who have projects, if they're looking for a public artist, whether it's a city project or not, we have a roster of artists that they can work from versus just Googling blindly who's out there, who's available. So we often use this as a referral opportunity. Artists at all stages of their career will be encouraged to apply, especially early and mid-career artists. We're really hoping that we can use this project, again, not necessarily in the incubator idea, but as a low barrier to entry for visual artists to enter the public art arena because they're kind of one-and-done static sculptures versus these larger aesthetic design projects. Geographic eligibility for this project will include preferences for Wichita and Kansas-based artists. What we've seen over the last couple of years is we haven't had a huge influx of local artists participate. I would say we anticipate it for this one, but we will likely have it a national call just to see what's out there to make sure we get the best of the best for these pedestals, but we'll have some sort of preference or bonus points available for Wichita and Kansas-based artists. Some reminders for the public that we have Public Art Archive. This is where we publicly list and showcase our collection. The city has over 300 works of public art that can be viewed at publicartarchive.org. You can search by the artist, by type of art, by location. It's a really interactive platform. Some benefits of public art, especially in the downtown area, is that public art's been proven to reduce property damage. It makes for a more walkable environment. It can calm traffic and prevents accidents, increases property values, enhances and beautifies the built environment, and spurs tourism by creating a sense of place and adds to the cultural identity to a community. For financial considerations, the adopted CIP includes $200,000 in GO funding as part of the 2% for Art program administered by the Design Council. I also want to acknowledge that we have an outstanding grant request with the NEA that we submitted last year to match the funding for this project. We requested an additional $100,000 due to the uncertainty in federal funding right now. We don't really want to wait for that funding to present itself or not. We think that if we do get it funded, that we'll be able to integrate that into the overall project based on the time it takes to get calls for art out and a selection panel mobilized. We typically anticipate hearing back from them in the springtime, March, April. Our colleagues and counterparts at the NEA have said that this program is still under review for those grant applications for last year. But regardless of if we receive that funding or not, we do plan on moving forward with that project. We would like to move forward with this project. And staff recommend approve the bonding resolution and initiate the project funding. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Lindsay. We'll begin with Council Member Glasscock.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for your presentation, Lindsay. I'm very excited about the jump from 47 to 58% in terms of local artists, but I also love having the national artists come in too and offer a different flavor for things as well. You mentioned an artist registry. How many artists are currently on the registry? Do we know?
Approximately 90 to 100, says our public art manager.
Okay, great. I imagine we do, but do we ever go out to Final Fridays and get people maybe information of, hey, we have a public art registry. Do you want to register for this program?
We have not. I love the idea. If we had the manpower and volunteer support to help do that, we'd be happy to do that. We do have a new kind of infographic card describing our public art program through Public Art Archive, because we're really trying to get the word out of where public art is, how you can view it, how you can access it. But love the idea of getting local artists on the registry as well.
I would love to volunteer for that. I try to go to a lot of them. So
Noted.
I noticed on page 85, this is just a small detail, regarding, or on slide 85, but regarding maintenance of the structure as well. I noticed a lot of rust on that in terms of the pedestal. How often do we maintain the pedestal? So it's not, the art piece looks great, but then the pedestal kind of deepens the piece.
Noted. I will say for this one, I think the picture was taken right after installation. That property received significant renovations. Agnew and Associates have a stunning facility in a residential area as well. So I'm not sure if this picture was taken right around that same time. Because the program has been dormant, we have not been maintaining them. So that's something that as we develop the program, we will definitely take that into consideration. I will offer that when in the previous Sculpture Walkabout program, the city was supportive of maintaining and assisting the artists with installation and deinstallation. So we're used to that, and we would plan to do that again with this program.
And would that come from the 2% for art for the maintenance aspect of it?
That's a good question. It could. We do have, so 10% of the 2% is allocated for maintenance projects. We also have some funding within our general operations support that we can absorb depending on the scope and scale. If it's pedestal needs to be completely rebuilt, that would likely fall under CIP. If it's just some steel wool and elbow grease, we would likely just accommodate that out of our general budget.
Okay, great. Well, I'm proud of our art in this community, especially the public art projects. And so because of that, there's one in District 4, so I just want that noted in the green packet, because District 1 and District 6 are the only two that get credit for it. So one of them is in District 4.
My apologies. Thank you.
Council Member Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Lindsay. You've been doing a lot of work, and a lot of the other artists here as well. Appreciate you coming up and chatting about this and just expressing support for this program. And thank you, Council Member Glasscock. You asked quite a bit of the questions that I had with the maintenance. I guess the only question I really have at this point is, I think I caught we're going to have at least 2 of the pedestals that are still open for kind of rotating pieces. Is that correct, or?
Hopefully not. We're hoping that these are all permanent installations. The 2 pedestals that are currently filled, one of them is a donation to the city, so we've already acquired that, so that one's done. The permanent loan from Agnew and Associates, we believe is permanent in perpetuity, at which time, if they change their mind at any point, we will address that at that time, but I think we're on a very long-term loan for that one, and we have no reason to believe it won't be there in perpetuity.
Okay, so all of these we're trying to get permanent statues.
That's the goal.
Okay, thank you.
Lindsay, I have several questions, so I'll go by slides. I'll start off with slide number 86. It looks like there are 4 organizations that are stakeholders. My question then to you is, have those 4 organizations said that they would maybe donate a piece of art? I know that you mentioned Agnew and Associates. I'm really grateful that Antoine has done that for the community. He purchased it himself, and then he thought it would be nice public art for the rest of the community to enjoy. And so I'm appreciative of donors who do things like that for the greater good. So my question then is, would these 4 organizations be interested in helping with donating some of these pieces?
That's a great question. I'll offer that when the Arts Council decided to sunset the program, all of these organizations were engaged. A lot of public reached out to say, what does this mean? How do we figure this out? I presented to Downtown Wichita and to Old Town Association what it would take to get the program back up and running, and some different opportunities for funding to support it, what a single sculpture typically costs. We did not get anyone to bite, and no one showed up to help fund those opportunities. I will offer, and Matthew's still in the room with the Arts Council, that they do have some funding available, I believe, from the program still that's earmarked for the program to support it in some capacity. I don't know that there's funding available to purchase anything outright, but that can support some part of the program, perhaps in marketing or a kickoff party or something to that extent. But to my knowledge, these partners have not made themselves known that they'd be interested in purchasing it, though we're always open to that.
That disappoints me a bit, knowing that a large majority of these pedestals are in the Old Town Association district. So like, I guess there's only a few that are in other areas of this specific map. So I would encourage, I guess, the Old Town Association or anyone who has pieces that they have in their collection to donate them to public art. So that would be one suggestion. Slide number 88. This piece right here, I remember we brought this up during consent agenda. So can you tell me how much, on average, a sculpture like this costs? And for this in particular, we've been paying for it. And I believe, if I remember correctly, we've gone to almost the amount of what this actually costs. So then the city could purchase it. But in the event that we do purchase it, I would also like to know the ongoing cost of maintaining these sculpture pieces, as they do need some maintenance over time.
Sure. Great question, observation on this one. Staff had the same observation. I believe we've had this one installed for about 3 years, that we've done an annual payment to some extent of about $1,200. I believe the purchase price is between $10 and $15, depending on where it lands with the artist, which is, I would say, pretty common for a sculpture of this size and scale. In the previous sculpture walkabout program, we saw anywhere from like $5,000 to $20,000. It can really run the gamut depending on size, scale, scope, materials. But for this one, in the $10,000 to $15,000 range is what I would estimate. We do have confirmation from the artist that previous payments made for this sculpture in particular could be made towards the purchase price if that was a direction we want to go. One of the challenges we have is we don't have a mechanism to purchase artwork if that's the will of what we want to do outside of the 2% for Art program. So when we identified, well, yeah, we've almost paid the full cost. We don't have a mechanism to purchase if that's what we wanted to do. By folding it into this program, it gives us that opportunity, but also gives us the opportunity to see what else is out there. So this artist would still have to submit and competitively essentially bid on the pedestal. It might have priority ranking given that it's already there, but that would be the will of the committee, the design council and city council, to make that final decision.
And then my other question is more in broad stroke regarding public art. I appreciated when you started off this presentation by saying this public art really is so that, quote, everyone can enjoy at all times. Mm-hmm. And so I really appreciate when public art is really outdoors, people can enjoy it, again, at all times. So I'm supportive of this idea of moving forward with more permanent pieces, but I'm still cautious knowing that we have a budget deficit, but I know that this is very allocated and specific. It can only be spent for art. So you can't move, I know community wants us to move dollars into this, move dollars out of it into other areas, but this is specific to public art and art in itself. So my question really goes down to, have we ever thought about utilizing those dollars to fund bigger public art pieces? For instance, I think during the budget process, I mentioned a big mural. We have a big mural on one of the grain elevators, but we have an even bigger grain elevator where you could do something very Wichita themed and Wichita specific. Another big idea, for instance, I've seen already some artwork regarding Century 2 and putting an airplane on top of it, or really speaking to the air capital of the world. We don't have anything downtown that says we are the air capital of the world. And then last but not least, I remember Senator Olitha Faust-Godot sharing that she would love to see an Instagrammable, larger than life ruby red slippers to bring people to our community. So these items all take dollars, and I know that there are other big ideas that our community has, but how are those big ideas ever going to be funded if we just continue doing little pieces? And I appreciate it, but anything big like that, how would they get funded?
a lot of things that I'm really excited about because I too would love to do some big projects. To kind of the first part of the caveat that we have within the Percent for Art program itself is that funding can only be used for City of Wichita property. So we'd have to be mindful of those funds, as the ordinance currently relates, can only be used for city property. And the projects that are selected complement existing projects within the CIP. This project in particular, the Downtown Pedestal project, is the first project that we're doing outside of the rest of the CIP. So it's a standalone project. It's not related to other CIP projects. So this is a little bit of a pilot, the first time we're doing this, and the ordinance does allow us to do that. In terms of other projects or kind of big picture projects, that would, I would say, be at the will of the Design Council to how they allocate those funds. It would come at probably the expense of other projects that we have going on. These last few years, we've done a lot of projects related to our quality of life services. So libraries, pools, parks have had some major renovation projects. I think it's important to acknowledge to complement those quality of life services with aesthetic enhancements. So those have received a lion's share of the public art funding over the last few years. But in terms of big projects, if it's the will of the council, if it's the will of both the Design Council and City Council, it's just a manner of identifying the project and managing the allocated budget to make those projects happen. I recently actually had a meeting with Senator Faustido about the Ruby Red Slipper, and I told her to reach out to me with more ideas. That's an example of if a community member has an idea, and I think in that idea, I believe, had some private dollars attached to making it happen, we can absolutely figure out how to accommodate that. I don't know that I can quote the percentage of our public art collection that's been donated to the city, but a good chunk of it is gifts to the city, a variety of different partnerships and agreements we have with various community partners or sister city gifts. It's not unusual at all for us to accept donations to the city. We always want to be mindful of maintenance. Is this something that we can actually cite? Do we have a plan for it? Can we accommodate it? But we can entertain any idea out there. And does that address your questions?
It does.
Okay.
I just wanted to, I know that you had a presentation regarding public art last year, and there was a slide in there that I'd like to see updated. So slide number 16 of that presentation was regarding public art spending by district. I would like to see it continue moving forward, getting an update like that. I think it's important for community to know that we make investments into public art and where they're located by district. So slide number 16, if that could be updated, I'd appreciate that.
Can do.
And then last but not least, I just wanted to say thank you. I know you and the team brought out Joan of Arc out of the basement, and now it's public art right here at City Hall. And I appreciate seeing our public art that we've already collected over the years coming back to light. So if there are more opportunities like that, if there's anything in our storage that also could be part of these pedestal art pieces, I think we should consider that as well.
Yeah.
Council Member Glasscock.
Thank you, Mayor. Your comments just, sparked this too. I would be interested at what the capital cost would be to bring our pieces outside of storage, and if there was a cost, where this body could find the money. I think if we have these art pieces, I would like them brought up, and you may already have that, and it might be easily accessible. But I would just be interested. If we have it, let's make sure we showcase it as much as we can.
If I could just comment on that, we do have a plan for all works that are in storage, with the exception of maybe 2 or 3 that we're still figuring out if they are truly in the public art collection or if they were, if they're not part of the public art collection. But everything of scale, I would say, of sculptural value, we do have plans for. That was part of our CIP maintenance program last fiscal year to initiate 24 funding. So I believe it's in the $120,000 range to do those maintenance, which included Joan of Arc, the Lotus sculptures that we're trying to get back into Riverside Park. But we do believe we have a plan to address everything that's currently in storage and get it out. Last year or the year before, we brought Big Red out, who was in storage for a couple decades. It's now on display in front of the library. We have a plan, I believe, for everything that's currently in storage to get it out. If additional funding is needed, you'll all be the first to know. So.
I imagine that to be the case. Last, this would probably be in the comment section, but I'll just say it now as well. I recently was on one of the artist selection committees. I found it a very smooth process. I found it a very rewarding process, a very efficient process. And so I just want to credit you and your team in that. I think we met 4 or 5 times, and I'm excited about the possibilities on the riverfront as a result of that conversation. So thank you, and it helped instill even greater trust I had in our public art collection.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. I see no further questions for staff. We'll open it up for public comment. I see none. Bring it back to the bench. This resides in Council Members Johnston, Ballard, and Glasscock's district.
Mayor, I'm going to take this motion. Mayor, I move that the City Council initiate the project and approve the bonding resolution.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Mr. Clerk, please open the roll.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Mr. Clerk, please call the next item.
Clapp Park Clubhouse lease.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Here to talk with you about the Clapp Park Clubhouse lease. A little background on this. In mid-2019, the golf course which was L.W. Clapp Memorial Park closed. And from 2019 to 2021, the golf course was vacant. In mid-2021, the clubhouse rented to Ducks Flying Disc, the local disc sports pro shop, to continue to activate the park. In mid-2024, the agreement with Ducks Disc expired and into a month-to-month agreement. A little bit of analysis on this. A request for a proposal was prepared to solicit vendors to lease the Clapp Pub House, and on December the 27th, the proposals were due. On January 6 and 8, staff screening committee reviewed the proposals and selected interviews for both vendors that applied. One vendor did not show for the interview, and following the interviews, the staff determined that the remaining vendor, Ducks Flying Disc, met all criteria to proceed as the selected vendor. They had a thorough proposal, demonstrated success through past performance, and established approach in the project that meets the city's objectives. On February the 10th, 2025, the Park Board of Commissioners voted to approve the lease agreement. A little additional analysis on the current vendor that's being proposed is that their volunteer services they have on site, they have donated over 2,100 volunteer hours by the staff in the media network, resulting in about $75,000 in direct benefits to the city. 1,000 hours coordinated with outside community groups. The tenant supplies the cleanup materials and volunteers who pick up and trash and maintain the creek area and trim trees and limbs, etc. on site. And the staff and volunteers maintain the 2 championship golf courses, the parking lot, the sidewalks, and other public areas. Park and Rec benefits from reduced workload for park maintenance at Clapp. So for planned events that they have coming in there, they have $300,000 in economic impact just from one national disc golf tournament, the Keeper of the Chains, and the Wichita Open. Hosts and assists with a dozen of events annually. They host statewide disc golf tournaments, disc golf leagues, Parks and Rec Candy Crawl, as well as National Night Out, and partnership with WSU and USD 259 host cross-country meets on site as well. So some of the collaborations that they actually have with being there on site is with local businesses. They also work with the VA Medical Center, the Kansas Disc Golf Museum, as well as work with creating a safe place to provide resources for those who are in need who visit the park there on site. The point of contact for the park visitors and increase our opening for the new playground. We anticipate that they will be even more of an asset to assist there on site with information, concessions, and bathrooms for the public on site. They have a small lounge area that's there for special events and birthday parties and baby showers, and soon we'll offer groups to the recent partnership with the VA hospital. So financial considerations for the lease is rent for a 3-year initial term. Year 1 will be $700 per month plus $200 for utilities. Year 2 will be $800 per month plus $200 for utilities. And year 3 will be $900 per month plus $200 for utilities. And then 2 one-year options to extend the term, and rent will be negotiated.
So legal considerations, the law department has reviewed and approved the lease agreement as to form, and it is recommended that the city council approve the vendor selection, approve the lease agreement, and authorize the necessary signatures. And I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Reggie. Questions for staff? I see none. Thank you. We'll open it up for public comment. I see none. I'll bring it back to the bench. This resides in Council Member Hoheisel's district.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate everybody's work going through a process. I know we've had some issues with contracts getting updated. It's part of an overall policy kind of change that we're looking at now. So I appreciate everybody's patience with that. Mr. Danderant, you're here today. Thank you for all the work that you do. I hear from a lot of the neighborhood people around there, just how grateful they are that you're helping with the upkeep there. And maybe once I'm out of office one day, I'll be able to go out there and throw discs again at the park that's right down the street from me. But yes, I think there's not going to be a lot of people out there today. But again, thank you, sir, for all that you do for us and our community. And with that, I will take staff's recommended action and move that we approve the vendor selection, approve the lease agreement, and authorize the necessary signatures.
Second.
Motion and a second. I see an individual speak. Did you want to speak during public comment? Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Mr. Clerk, please open the roll.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Mr. Clerk, please call the next item.
Approve Mayor Wu's travel to attend Aviation Day at the Capitol in Topeka on March 3rd, 2025, for the purpose of gathering with legislators, manufacturers, suppliers, and aviation businesses, providing networking opportunities and exposure. There is no cost to the city.
I move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. I will make one correction. I'm taking a City of Wichita Public Works vehicle. Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Mr. Clerk, please open the roll.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Mr. Clerk, please call the next item.
Approve that pursuant to Section 2.4.90, Council Member Johnston's travel expenses, as estimated on the travel authorization and expense form, to attend NLC's Congressional City Conference in Washington, D.C., March 8th through 13th, 2025, for the purpose of representing the City of Wichita by meeting with federal officials consistent with AR 3.1, be approved. Upon return from travel, actual expenses shall be reported to the Controller's office.
I move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Mr. Clerk, please open the roll.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Mr. Clerk, please call the next item.
Approve that pursuant to Section 2.4.90, Council Member Glasscock's travel expenses, as estimated on the travel authorization and expense form, to attend NLC's Congressional City Conference in Washington, D.C., March 8th to 12th, 2025, for the purpose of representing the City of Wichita by meeting with federal officials consistent with AR 3.1, be approved. Upon return from travel, actual expenses shall be reported to the Controller's office.
I move to approve this travel.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Mr. Clerk, please open the roll.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Mr. Clerk, please call the next item.
Approve that pursuant to Section 2.4.90, Council Member Tuttle, Vice Mayor Johnston, Council Member Ballard, and Mayor Wu's travel expenses, as estimated on the travel authorization and expense form to attend NLC's Congressional City Conference in Washington, D.C., March 9th through 12th, for the purpose of representing the City of Wichita by meeting with federal officials, consistent with AR 3.1, be approved. Upon return from travel, actual expenses shall be reported to the Controller's Office.
I will move to approve travel.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Mr. Clerk, please open the roll.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Mr. Clerk, please call the next item.
Approve that pursuant to Section 2.4.90, Councilmember Hoheisel's travel expenses, as estimated on the travel authorization and expense form, to attend NLC's Congressional City Conference in Washington, D.C., March 9th through 13, 2025, for the purpose of representing the City of Wichita by meeting with federal officials, consistent with AR 3.1, be approved. Upon return from travel, actual expenses shall be reported to the Controller's Office.
I move to approve this travel.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Mr. Clerk, please open the roll.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Mr. Clerk, please call the next item.
Retroactively approve that pursuant to Section 2.4.90, Councilmember Hoheisel's travel expenses, as estimated on the travel authorization and expense form, to Topeka, Kansas, February 10th, 2025, for the purpose of providing testimony on HB 2357 and HB 2349, consistent with AR 3.1, be approved. Upon return from travel, actual expenses shall be reported to the Controller's Office.
Councilmember Hoheisel.
Just one point. I'm not seeking any reimbursement for travel.
I will move to approve that travel.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Mr. Clerk, please open the roll.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Mr. Clerk, please call the next item.
Councilmember appointments and comments.
We'll start with appointments, beginning with Councilmember Tuttle.
Thank you. I would like to reappoint Lucretia Taylor to the Ethics Advisory Board.
Councilmember Glasscock.
Thank you, Mayor. After completing a background check, I would like to appoint Matt Lashley to the Citizens Review Board.
We have two appointments of Councilmember Vice Mayor Johnston.
Thank you. I'd like to reappoint Dennis Cleary to the Ethics Board.
We have three appointments, and we'll do it together if that's okay. I move to approve the three appointments.
Second.
Councilmember Johnson seconded it. Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. It is now time for council member comments. Vice Mayor Johnston. Council Member Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to give a shout out again to all our public works employees who are out there freezing their butts off. We think it's chilly up here. Actually, most of you guys on the mainland over there, I'm on an island by myself, think it's chilly in here, but they're out there working their butts off to make sure that our streets are safe for everybody. Also, our first responders, firefighters, fires don't stop during this time. They're still out there, and PD, everything that they do, especially now with the emergency homeless outreach plan, trying to make sure that everybody who lives in Wichita is safe from the elements right now. So thank you all for all the work that you're doing while we're sitting here mildly chilly at this time.
I will now ask some pertinent questions to staff. I'll start off with, there was a fire on Saturday, February 12th at, I believe, 1234 North Wellington Place, which is near the multi-agency neighborhood. My question, I believe I asked this of city manager and assistant city manager, was the fire at a city-owned property?
Honorable Mayor Troy Anderson, Assistant City Manager. Yes, this was a city-owned facility. To provide you a little bit of background, it was a storage building. I believe at one point in time it was used for storing salt, which actually compounded the issues out there, but the building was in significant disrepair, safety, security concerns. And so several months ago, we began the process of identifying opportunities to have that building raised. It was actually in the process of being demolished. And so we've been in contact with the contractor. We have every reason to believe that the fire will not impact their ability to continue to demo the building. In fact, it should be got an email response a little while ago. The building should be demoed hopefully by the end of the week.
My question then, second follow-up to that is, the email that was sent to the entire council regarding this fire said that they had encountered 14 different homeless individuals staying in the building for shelter, and that this building was left unsecured due to demolition. So I have a concern when we have city-owned property that is left unsecured. Can you please address that?
Yes, so this building has been a site in which we have had significant, a number of issues throughout the years with the building getting broken into. And so, again, all the more reason why it was our efforts to ultimately raise the building to prevent that from continuing to be a safety and security concern. There were some, we're still trying to find out the details. There was a period in which there was some paperwork associated with the demolition. So we're looking into perhaps maybe why the contractor hadn't secured the entire premises for demolition. We're looking into that. But again, for that point, that's exactly one of the reasons why we had continually had incidents where the building was getting broken into for this reason. It was not structurally safe. We had concerns about the structural integrity of the building, and that all led us to the decision to demolish the building.
I would like to ask questions regarding the contract with the contractor of securing this premise, as we've now utilized fire resources during a very cold time. In addition, they were afraid that there might be individuals inside the building. So I'm concerned that the contractor did not secure this property. So what in the contract does it say about securing? Then, since you mentioned that demolition will happen sooner rather than later, we would like to get that report when demolition actually happens so we can be held accountable to the community.
Yeah, I don't have the contract in front of me. I don't have that information, but we'll be more than happy to provide that.
And then last but not least, anytime we have city-owned properties that are involved in a major incident like this, I would like to have that be noted up at the top rather than having to ask last night if this is a city-owned property. I don't think anyone on the council knew that this was a city-owned property. And when I got this email regarding this fire, I looked and saw that it was only a block or so away from the multi-agency center, and it concerned me because I did not want to see any individuals hurt, whether it's our firefighters or individuals facing homelessness. So again, anytime it's a city-owned property, I think it should be highlighted at the top.
Yeah, we will get together with fire department and discuss how we can better respond to that.
Thank you. I see no further comments from the council. I will move to adjourn this meeting.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Mr. Clerk, please open the roll.
Aye.
We adjourn at 11:31. Thank you.